Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us for the webinar. We're going to get started in just a couple of minutes. Until that time, we're going to mute the phone line so you won't hear anything, but we'll get started in just a few minutes.
All right. Hi, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining us on today's webinar, The Power of Social or Storytelling and Social Media. I'm Angela Knudsen, the Program Manager for the Retention and Care Program here at AIDS United. And we have an exciting agenda planned for you today. And welcome to our Access to Care grantees, including our RIC grantees as well as our SIF grantees. We're also joined by Erin Nortrup, the Senior Program Manager for Access to Care, who's about to be a new mom in a week or two. And we'd also like to thank Cody Barnett, AIDS United's Communication Coordinator, for his presentation today. Just a few housekeeping notes before we get started. All attendees are in listen-only mode. You're welcome to use the chat feature on the right-hand side of your screen to communicate with the group. And you can also select the icon to raise your hand. And we'll have opportunities for questions and answers at the end of Cody's presentation. And if you'd like to submit a question to AIDS United directly, you can do so in the question feature as well. If you're experiencing any technical difficulties, please email Erin Nortrup. Her email was included in the original webinar invitation. And we're also recording today's presentation, which will be posted on our website shortly. And without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Cody.
Hey, everybody. I am so excited to have you on this webinar. My name is Cody Barnett, and I joined the AIDS United family about 3 months ago. I'm really excited to work more closely with all of you, and I think this is going to be a really valuable professional development and kind of learning opportunity. I came to AIDS United after working on a Robert Wood Johnson Foundation funded project for 3 years in higher education research setting, where our biggest goal and challenge was how to communicate the success and opportunities of a very complicated $300 million investment by the foundation in a way that made real people understand. It's something that I don't think we ever got 100% right, but it's something that we took a real journey and learned some great things along the way, and I'm here to share some of that with you. So for this webinar, we're going to kind of really briefly talk about why stories are powerful tools, how they can influence and change people's views or mindsets, and how you can harness the power of them to do what you need to do for your organization and in your personal lives. We'll talk about what makes an effective story, and then how effective stories can be told through social media. And for social media, we're not going to get into the nitty-gritty of how you actually write or compose a tweet, but we'll look at some really high-level things that you should be doing, things to be aware of that will make your your tweeting or your Facebook post most impactful. And then we're going to have some time for question and answers at the very end. So stories are really important because they have the power to change the way we experience the world around us. They help frame important events. They help guide how we view the world. And they also can reach millions of people. Stories are also extremely memorable. We all remember growing up, maybe it was Disney, maybe it wasn't, but like those stories and cartoons, movies that helped us understand morality, right from wrong. We all know where we were during important historical events like September 11th. We can tell that story, and that impacts people. Stories can inform, persuade, and connect people to your cause, to your issue, to your program. They give voice and can help humanize an issue in a way that can be really useful, particularly when we deal with issues like HIV/AIDS that have a lot of stigma around them. In addition, storytelling is a really great professional development piece. It's a great life skill. So whether or not you're interacting with a potential funder or a potential employer, whether or not you're trying to get a promotion, being able to articulate your value using storytelling is a really great and useful tool. So I think it's really important to tell people right up front what is the most important thing that you can take away from this presentation, and it is on the slide. The key takeaway is impact matters more than process. So what that means is people really don't care about the process that it took you to get somewhere. What they care about is how it can change the world, how it can make a difference, how it addresses a problem. So you need to hook your listeners or readers in right away with the details they care about. Facts and figures are great, but you also need to give them some guidance about how to understand or interpret what you're giving them. When you focus on impact and not process, you're being action-oriented, action-centered, and you're getting them to details that really make a difference. For example, a meeting of a diverse group of stakeholders is not exciting news. But if you reframe that same thing and talk about how you are convening to discuss, to energize, or to mobilize your community around an issue, that's more exciting. That's something that people can be interested in. That's something they see the value of. Receiving a grant, regardless of how much money, is really not something that's going to make the 5 o'clock news. But when you share an incredible opportunity to change X, Y, Z in your community, that shifts the focus from getting a grant to being able to address a real need. And that, again, makes people more excited. It makes them more likely to share your news or to remember why your work is important. We all talk about wanting to increase something or decrease other things or improve something else. But if you're not connecting that to people, connecting numbers to lives changed, that's a real missed opportunity because you're not accurately portraying the value you provide your community or the impact you're making. So if we move on to the next slide, this one. So this is a really great infographic because it is focusing on impact and not necessarily what they're doing. It's an extreme example. You don't need to be this graphical. You don't need to invest in design. But it really illustrates what we're trying to move towards, where you are clearly articulating what you provide and what that means. All right. So the next slide talks about what an effective story is. An effective story is personal, meaning you don't necessarily have to be the main character in the story, but your listener or reader should understand why you, in particular, are telling it. Why are you connected to this? Why are you in a position where this makes sense? So for example, at AIDS United, we tweet or post on Facebook a lot about all sorts of topics. But the ones that we get the most traction in are the ones where it is very clear why we, AIDS United, with the mission that we have, are discussing it. So, if we're talking about pop culture or, I don't know, a development in the cancer world, yes, that's healthcare, but that's not specific to our mission. So it is a little bit more difficult for people to see us as a legitimate voice in that. Stories should also have a clear goal. You should know what you're trying to do before you start telling a story, whether that is talking to a potential funder, whether or not you're talking to volunteers. You should know what you're trying to communicate and why before you start, because that really helps frame either the exact stories you tell or how you tell it. Again, that brings us to the next point. They should be really tailored to a specific audience so that you're giving them the exact details that they need to complete your goal or to move them forward along the progression. Effective stories are also well-informed. So if there are facts, figures, statistics that are relevant, germane, that are really telling, you should include them. Whether or not that means you have to jot something down and either reference that while speaking or you can memorize it, both are okay, but you should have facts where it makes sense to have facts. The story should also be really clear and focused. So if your goal is A, you should not be talking about things that detract from accomplishing A. If your objective is B, you should really stick to that so that it's very clear and linear about what you're trying to convey and why. And then the last piece of advice, and I think this is really important, is shorter is always better. Be concise. Even if you're given an hour to have a meeting or to have a conversation, if you can get done what you need to get done sooner, people always appreciate that. So be concise, but be thorough. All right, so the next one is really an important lesson, I think, for everyone, and it comes from the book Switch, How to Change Things When Change is Hard, and that is in the lower left-hand corner of the cover of that book, and it's written by Chip Heath, who has a really great way of kind of framing what is important, what you should be highlighting, and he calls them bright spots. So the bright spot concept is the idea that if your kid comes home from school with their report card and, they've got a few D's, maybe there's an F, there's a C+, but then there's an A-. And it's really easy as a parent or as anyone to really hone in on that F. Like, what are you doing? How can we fix that? Like, are you not doing your homework? Are you not understanding? But what Chip Heath is suggesting is, instead of honing in on what you don't want to see, we should really focus on the bright spot. So focus on that A. What are you doing that is enabling you or empowering you to get that A? Maybe you're sitting in the front of the classroom. Maybe you are, maybe you're just really interested. You've done a lot of background reading. Maybe the teacher uses a lot of hands-on demonstrations, or the way they ask a lot of questions, or there's a lot of group work. But what is it about that class that you're able to get an A when your performance in a lot of other areas isn't where you'd like it to be? And then once you have the answer to some of those questions, thinking through how you can replicate that success. So how one firework or bright spot can be turned into kind of a sky full of light. And that is that replicable bright spot is really what you should hone in on, and that is a story. That is something that the media would be interested in. That's something that a funder or a volunteer, that's something that you should really be taking ownership of, and then using the successes that you found there and applying it to all of your work. And sometimes these are a little bit difficult to find because maybe you've been doing it so well for so long that you kind of forget how incredible it is that you are doing this. And sometimes you got to take a step back and kind of reevaluate all of your work to kind of really find and hone in on these bright spots. And that's my biggest piece of advice for discovering them is you probably have more of them than you realize. So the next slide, this is to kind of help you frame your story or to kind of hone in on what it is that you want to be telling people. The order of these things isn't as important as doing all of them, and then you'll find a way that works best for you. But I think particularly for organizations, it makes sense to start off with a goal. Maybe you're writing an annual appeal letter. Maybe you are getting ready to do a big volunteer drive, or you're launching a new program, or you're looking for more funding to do anything that you're already working on. Identifying that goal first is where I would start. And then I would think about who is in the audience. What does that audience need to hear, or what do groups of people in the audience need to hear? And then how can you address those needs? So I think a really easy, obvious example is when you're talking to members of Congress, you might reframe the value or the success of a program depending on what the senator or House member wants to hear. So maybe someone is really interested in cost effectiveness. So you'll highlight how your program or project has a real potential to save a lot of money down the road. Or maybe there's someone who's really interested in equity, so you'll highlight those sort of attributes about your program. So when you think through who your audience are, you can pre-plan what you're definitely going to want to cover, what you're going to want to beat them over the head with, so that you can make the most impact. The next thing is, why are you the best suited to either address this topic, to have that conversation, or to have a program like that? Maybe it's you have a long history of doing successful work in this area. Maybe it's you have a strong interest, or you have a really great staff capacity that is just really going to address this issue in a really great, meaningful way. And then I would actually look at, like, what are the specific stories and things that you'll draw upon. But having answered the first three questions, the what is your goal, who are you talking to, and why, I think that really makes the selecting the specific little snippets of story or like anecdotes much clearer why you should choose them. When you find, when you answer all four of those questions so that you now know what you're writing about, why you are writing about this, who you're writing to, and then your goal, what you're trying to make them do. Either maybe you're informing them or persuading. You now can start thinking through how you'll actually compose that message. And there's a lot of different tools that you have. You can use facts and figures and quotes. Stories, I think, are one of the best ways because they're very memorable. It's easy to connect to, and they're humanizing. But we also all rely on current events, and I think this week is probably a really great example of that with World AIDS Day. I'm sure everyone on this line released something, or you know, maybe you did an event or a visual. Everyone, current events are a great hook. The other one that I think people don't always remember or kind of use to their fullest potential are photos. Maybe you had a really great image that someone took with their iPhone, because it's amazing what our phones and cameras can do now, and you got a great snapshot of a volunteer event, an outreach table, or you know, whatever it is that you're doing, and that photo can really drive a story. And like what they say is true. Photos really are worth 1,000 words, and people can share and connect with that in a really great way. And I think that is a great lead-in to the second portion of the webinar, which is social media. And at first, it might seem a little awkward that we're combining storytelling and social media, but I think we understand, I think, intuitively how an email can work, how an email can tell a story. But social media is also a great vehicle to communicate stories. Yes, they're shorter. Yes, the conventions and the mechanics are a little bit different. But social media is a really valuable tool that can help you reach a whole new market segment and engage more rapidly and more frequently and more meaningfully with your stakeholders or audience or community. Full disclosure, I also want to make it really clear that this portion of the webinar is working under the understanding that you are already on social, that maybe you have a Facebook page, maybe you have a Twitter profile. I'm not expecting that you're doing everything. I'm also expecting that there is a progression, and you're somewhere between 0 and 10, and you're trying to improve your presence or to use your limited resources in the most effective way possible. And to that end, I also want to say that almost 90% of communications professionals, 88% in an industry poll, said that their website and email are still the most valuable communications platform. And I think a lot of that has to do with frequently we measure success in communications by how readily people donate. And there's really not a great way to donate money through social media. So I think that's where a lot of that comes from. Also, an email newsletter subscriber list is a really great tool. It's a committed group of people. It's a lot more active than social media, which can sometimes be a passive platform. But with that said, I do want to really note that social media is an important and growing place where consumers and community members are their expectations surrounding it are increasing greatly. So to start at the very bottom and work our way up, social media is a term that we use to describe the highly interactive qualities of electronic media. It's a little bit different than email in that it is generally very public. It is very fast. It's interactive. Not only can you release something, but your audience or community can respond to you. They can either passively through kind of analytics and metrics let you know what they're interested in, or they can actually tell you. So you'll get comments on everything and anything that you're working on. And there are, this aspect is something that's a little scary because you have less control. So if you do a great post and people comment and, half of them are great comments, the other quarter are okay or more neutral, but maybe a fourth of all comments are negative, you have to deal with that in a way that that purports your brand in a great way. The next thing is social is fast. About 3/4 of people who are social media or avid social media users expect an organization or brand to respond in less than 24 hours to a request. And this number is only getting, that time is only decreasing, so consumers are expecting, about a year and a half ago, that number was about 36 hours. 3 years ago, it was 48 hours. So that turnaround time that the general public assumes is realistic is only getting smaller. The next thing I also want to point out is that social media is a real community, and these are communities that you can create or tap into. A really great example is on Twitter. They use hashtag BCSM, which is breast cancer social media, and this is a healthcare hashtag community that gets together to discuss breast cancer and its impact. There are weekly conversations with thousands of people who take part. They have found so much success that they have actually formed their own not-for-profit organization that espouses the value of social media to connect people. I think that's one of the best things about social media is it helps break down barriers. It makes people feel less alone. And it's a really great place to either tap into what already exists, and maybe do a little bit of homework on what communities are already talking about your issue, and then the flip side, maybe there is a need to create a community around a specific issue. The last thing I really want to hammer is that social media is a real opportunity. It is low cost and has a real potential for high impact for your organization. We've all seen on the news those crazy little videos of cats that go viral. In the same way that those videos have gone viral, your organization's content can reach an incredible number of people if it's written in a way that resonates with people and it's highly shareable. And I think that's really important to remember. Yes, social media is new, it's different, it can be a little scary. But there's also a lot of potential to do some really good things that we've never been able to do before. So this section, I'm going to give 3 kind of big points that I think people need to remember or to go back to if they're already deep in the weeds in social media. And the first is making sure that your social media presence is integrated into what you're already doing. So, for example, if you're running a big program for World AIDS Day, that should be reflected on your website, in your email newsletters, but also in your social media postings. In the same way that, we all want the Affordable Care Act to have no wrong door to getting coverage, you want your communications platforms and all of your communications platforms to be no wrong door to the information that people need. The next, we want to make sure that your goals and strategies on social media also feed into or roll up into either your communication or organizational goals. If one of your goals is that that you are seen as a thought leader or a respected source of information in your community around an issue, you should be sharing things that make people see you as a thought leader in a specific issue in your community. You want to really hone into the idea that followers for the sake of followers is not, that's worth nothing if that is not rolling up into or driving traffic to either, maybe you do a series of fact sheets or resources, or, maybe you want people to know about new programs that you're running. If social is not contributing toward that, then then you're either not doing it very well, or maybe it's not something that you actually should be investing time in as an organization. So you really just want to spend some time and make sure that you've aligned your social media expectations and goals around what you're actually trying to do as an organization. My next suggestion is making sure that making it very clear that you don't think that you need to reinvent the wheel when it comes to content for your social media feeds. You probably have a ton of content that has already been developed that you can use, whether that's little stories or tidbits that you've used in your email newsletters, pages on your website, publications that you normally print. But if you post those same publications online as a PDF, you can then link to them and then share that information using social media. And when you take a step back and kind of go through, either letters that you've written donors or photos that you have around the office, quotes that you think, affirm or inspire, your clients, there's a lot of content that you already have that you can work with. Tone is something that, is really easy to overlook and not address in a conversation around social media or on communication, but I think it's something that we'd really be remiss if we didn't at least touch on, and that is the idea that when you're sharing things on social media, it should always be something that reflects your organization, reflects your mission, reflects who you are, and reflects your values at all times. So if you are looking at 2 articles or 3 articles around the same topic, one of which is really edgy, very controversial, it would probably get you a lot of attention, but you really should think through, is this the kind of attention that you want your organization to be known for? And if it is, great. Feel free to share it. That will get you exactly what you're looking for. But sometimes it's a little bit easier or it's a little safer to find a similar article from a different publication or newspaper or et cetera that has the same message but uses less inflammatory language around it. And you're going to need to be your own best judge of what is appropriate to share. But I really want to make sure that we mention and stress that social media is absolutely fair game to judge your organization based on the quality of things that you're putting out there. So just be aware of that and make sure that people who are sharing things on behalf of your organization are also aware of that. And then the last thing is it's really easy to align your social media work with things that you're doing that you're already doing, but that integration should work both ways. So things that you learn your audience really likes, maybe they're tips or tricks or photos or strategies to better adhere to your medication or whatever. Things that work on social media will probably also work on your website or in your email newsletters. So that integration should go both ways. The next point, and this really speaks to the idea that we all have a limited capacity. We have limited resources. We all want to be as effective as possible so that we can do the most work as possible to make the biggest difference. And that is, social should not be a huge burden. It shouldn't be difficult. You should not be sneaking in hours of every single day working on it. But with that being said, you need to manage your expectations. And if you are the person doing your communications work, that's a little bit easier to do. But you also need to manage the expectations of the staff around you or the leadership so that you're all realistic about what it is that you're going to achieve. If your goal is to get millions and millions of followers for your organizations, I wish you a lot of luck. Unfortunately, that's a very lofty goal. But if your goal is to educate your community, to share some great resources, to make sure they know when you have a 2-hour delay, that is absolutely a realistic goal for your social media work. And it's easier to decide on those expectations and make that very clear before you kind of dive into it rather than 6 months later when people you're kind of on different pages about where your success actually would look like. The next thing is set it and forget it. So there's a lot of really great tools it's built into Facebook for organizations. The idea that you can program and pre-schedule releases. So you can type it in, you can put the URL that you're going to share, and then set it, and then go about the rest of your day, and it will go out when you ask it to. So that can minimize or help you prioritize your work. I come in every morning and will do a lot of my social media work within the first half hour of arriving, using the next tip, which is news alerts. And I use Google News Alerts, but there's also news alerts from Bing and a lot of other search engines. But I have Google email me all of the new news articles that relate to HIV/AIDS, that relate to AIDS United, and a few other topics. And then I kind of read through them in the morning, look to see what makes sense for us to share, and then I schedule them, which is it means I don't have to search and dig around on the internet. It means that I don't have to be at my computer all hours ready to do something, and it maximizes my ability to do other things. My next piece of advice is that this doesn't need to be something that just one person does. I know a lot of organizations that will split it up among many people, where someone will handle something on Monday, someone will handle it on Tuesday, or in other organizations, different types of posts will be handled by different people. So maybe you have one person who's making sure that you have a medical staff person share a tip once a week, and that's what they're responsible for. And then someone else makes sure that operations updates are included, or that there are some photos from volunteers. So you can use your entire staff to either find content or actually do the sharing and make this a much more manageable burden. And social media also records which actual person it was who made a post. So there is some accountability measures that are built into these platforms. My last piece of advice for making it easy is that there are a lot of free and low-cost tools that will expand what you're able to do. So I included some at the bottom. Hootsuite and Buffer app are really great to kind of schedule your tweets or your Facebook posts. They also allow you to make cross-platform posts, so you can post to Twitter and Facebook at the same time. Bitly is a service that will shorten really long, cumbersome URLs. So if you're going to send someone to a web page, you can make it very short so it fits into a tweet a lot better. And there's a lot of other tools. So if you're having a problem, you can either email me or email someone here, and we can kind of think through, like, are there existing tools that could meet your needs? Or you can just Google them, because there's a lot of things out there. The next thing is making sure that your social media work is measurable. And, measuring social media success is a day-long conference in itself, or at least a webinar. So I'm not going to bore you with down and dirty, grimy details about the ins and outs and how to do it. But I do want to give you some areas of measurement that you can consider, and then you can kind of think through how you'd operationalize that. So you can measure exposure. Are you exposing people to new content, new ideas, the latest research, exposing them to your new program? Are you engaging them? Are you asking them questions? Are you getting a feel for the knowledge base of your community? Are you influencing people to change their behavior? And this is a little harder to measure, but you can do it. Are you encouraging greater condom usage, or are you encouraging retention and care? These are things that social media can absolutely help you do, but you should be very clear on how you're measuring that before you get started. You can also measure whether or not social media is helping people take action. So something that we do here at AIDS United is action alert emails, where we encourage HIV/AIDS advocates to either let their members of Congress know about a specific bill that they support or don't support. And we use social media to absolutely push that out to a new audience. But you can also measure how often social media helps get people to your donate page. Our social media is absolutely a great way to connect to people who to do X, Y, or Z. You just want to make sure that you're positioning yourself well enough that you can measure that when you want to later. This is a great chart that I'm not going to go over in super detail, but people generally really like it. It is some different ways and things that you can share on social media broken down. So you can give people offers, you can advise them about tips or obstacles. You can warn them of dangers or things coming soon. You can inspire people with quotes or coaching tips. You can also give facts and amusing little stories. And these are all things that can get you thinking in ways that maybe you wouldn't have otherwise about what social media can be used for. So just wanted to make sure I included this. And then finally, I have some just quick odds and ends that wanted to make sure I let you know about but didn't really fit into another category. And that social media is not all about you. So even if you have 30 different programs that are all incredible, I'm sure you do, all of your social media posts should not lead back to your own content. And I really like the quarter rule, which is, for every post that you have about, your initiative or asking people to support you or to learn about your organization, that you have 3 other posts that are connecting them to news or other things in the community. And so essentially 1/4 of your posts are about you, 3/4 are about your topic or issue or priorities. That's also a really great opportunity to make connections with other organizations in your community, to connect them to your funders, to make sure that you are thanking your volunteers. It's a really great way to make sure that you are diversifying what you're posting, and it's an opportunity to build bridges with other people you work with. My next piece of advice is to be visual. So posts that have photos, to be honest, even if the photos aren't very great, drive engagement. So posts with photos get more clicks, they get more likes, they get more comments. They're just noticed by people more frequently. So whenever you're able to include a photo, I highly recommend it. The next thing is, surprisingly or not, when you ask a question, people answer it. And on social media, that's also true. So when you ask a question in your post, they've measured it, and almost across the board, there's 2 times the engagement than the same post without a question. So where it's appropriate, use questions. We all want more engagement. We certainly don't want to be tweeting or putting things out there on Facebook that are getting nothing in return. That's not very fun. My next piece of advice is to do more of what works, which is really obvious. So after a few weeks, you'll really get a sense about what works for your audience. But the flip side of that is to do less of what doesn't. And sometimes what you want to be successful and what is don't align, and that can be difficult to let go. But if you're doing a really great video series that you feel really proud of, but if it's only getting viewed by a handful of people, you might want to reinvest those resources elsewhere to give people more of what they're actually asking for, to use your resources in the best way possible. And also, don't feel bad about that. It's just the reality of how it works. The next thing is the idea of unofficial brand ambassadors, and these are your staff, these are your volunteers. This is your CEO or your executive director who has a personal Twitter account that they're sharing things from you. This is your really eager volunteer who tweets about every new blog post you make and shares that with their community. This is your staff person who really adds their personal voice to your issue, to your cause, to your organization. And these are kind of the unsung heroes of social media. They really help set tone. They can address conflict or negative comments from other people in a way that your organizational account's not going to be able to. Social media is really driven by the idea of legitimacy or clout. And when someone speaks from their own voice as an individual, that is generally responded to in a more positive way than an organization or a brand. So these are great things, and you should encourage your staff to like your posts, to help spread the word. Encourage your volunteers to do the same. The other thing even your clients or patients can also be these unofficial brand ambassadors. I loved Planned Parenthood. I still love Planned Parenthood. And I love them because not only did I intern there and later work there, but I also had some great experiences in their medical center. And that resonates with me, and I want to thank them and bring attention to this incredible organization. And I'm absolutely an unofficial brand ambassador for organizations like that. And you should try to cultivate these relationships. Another thing that we talked through internally that I also wanted to mention is the idea of a junior board, where we all have board of directors who meet and guide our organizations. But a newer development is the idea of a junior board where there's age ranges, and they're younger adults who also are very committed to your organization, but they also have different skill sets. And junior boards are great people to kind of train or cultivate into these unofficial brand ambassadors because they're probably already doing it, and just kind of guiding them about what from an organizational standpoint is the most valuable thing for them to be sharing. All right, and I know we've talked a lot, so I'm hoping that there's a lot of questions. So if you have them, I think we're going to unmute you right now, and we'd love to hear them.
Yeah, thank you so much, Cody, for the presentation. It was really helpful information. And we do have time for questions. So the lines are currently muted, but if you have a question for Cody, please use the raise hand function on the webinar so I can unmute your line and you can ask your question. So we're going to just pause for a minute. Okay, we have a question from Monique. Go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Hey, Cody, great presentation. Thank you so much. I had a question actually about what I would term as oversaturation, whether it's, storytelling or storytelling through social media. Do you have any advice for when maybe there's too much going on?
Absolutely. And I think that my advice would be relative for every organization, and you will kind of discover that for yourself. I know for AIDS United, we can make about 3 to 4 Facebook posts a day before we start seeing negative response to our posts. Twitter is a little bit different, where just the nature of Twitter, the beast is a little different. You can share more frequently, and people are okay with that. So on Twitter, we share 5 or 6 times a day. But that's going to be different for every organization and every unique set of followers or community. The other thing are, in the same way that you might not want to release a press release on a holiday weekend, or you're going to want to be smart about what you're setting yourself up to compete against. And the flip side of that is you can always reuse posts that are really successful later on. Does that answer your question?
How do you know? It does. And how do you know when you're getting negative response? Like literally there's a negative response to your post?
So thankfully that is all on the back end. But in Facebook there's a lot of really great, they call it insight. And you can click into, from the administrator view of a Facebook post, and it will show you how many people are hiding posts from your organization, how many people have, unfollowed you based on that post, how many people, you can also measure things from your end. Are you getting a much lower like rate all of a sudden? And kind of make that determination.
Great. Thank you, Cody.
No problem.
So there was a question that we got in advance of the webinar, just a little follow-up on that, of are there particular days or times of day that are better for different social media platforms like Facebook or Twitter or other ones that you can recommend?
Sure. So again, this is going to be very specific to your organization, and it's kind of a trial by fire and see what works. The one thing I can say is, you would think that the weekends would not be a great idea, or late at night would not be a great idea. Actually, people frequently use social media on weekends and at night, so those are, surprisingly enough, that is a good time. The other thing that across the board has shown to be successful is between 8 and 9:30, which is kind of the morning commute, because people will either at the breakfast table or they're on a bus. They will read their feed and look through things. And the flip side of that is between like 4:30 and 6 is we also see the same thing.
Great, thank you. Are there other questions from folks on the webinar? If there are, please just use the raise your hand function and we'll unmute your line. Oh, it looks like we maybe have a question here. So there's a question that was typed in, interested in hearing advice for small CBOs who do not have designated staff who have expertise in social media to maintain the level of engagement that social media requires.
That's a great question, and I think it's something we all have to balance, because social media can very rapidly become a full-time job. But it also, I think this goes back to my point about just managing your expectations about what is realistic for your organization. You can very easily share 1 or 2 times a day with no more time than half an hour or 20 minutes. It's really, I read the news anyway in the morning, and generally before I even get to work, I have already kind of decided what looks like it's going to make the most impact for us to share. So that would be my biggest advice, is to think through what you're already reading, the news you're already consuming, and assume that is, if that's valuable to you, that's valuable to other people. The other thing is you can also get volunteers who, a trusted volunteer who, you build a level of trust about what your expectations are and what they're going to do. I work with a volunteer organization, on a volunteer basis with an organization where I manage a lot of their social media posts. And again, it's something that I spend 15 to 20 minutes, not even every day, but it becomes a very meaningful thing that you can do.
All right, thank you. Other questions from folks on the webinar? Just suppose one other that we heard before, again, before the webinar was, do you have recommendations if organizations on their Facebook page or other social media platforms get questions, whether they're messages or posts or comments on posts about accessing services? How do you recommend folks respond to that?
Sure. So I honestly, that's a great problem to have, that people are seeing you as a resource or an authority, and they're asking specific questions about something important enough as healthcare. My biggest piece of advice would be to think through and gather some brains together and pull together a cheat sheet of some stock answers that you can give people. For instance, the AIDS United social media accounts, we are not doctors. We are not pretending to give medical advice, because we're not. But we do try to connect people to local resources. So if someone asks me a question that I don't feel comfortable answering, I will look up or connect them to a local resource in their community, or provide some sort of a response where it's very clear, but you're also being affirming and making sure that you are not shutting a door for them. Another thing is you are not in control of what people share with you. So if someone is volunteering information about themselves, I would suggest that it's good to be aware that that's not always easy for people, in the same way that you would if it was a one-on-one interaction and, thanking them, but at the same time making it very clear that, you're not a therapy service, that you're not giving medical advice, and connecting them to where they can get services that they need, either to your website or give them the phone number that they can call. The other thing that you can do is to give them other online ways. So I don't know, maybe you have an email address where they can schedule an appointment. Give them the actual routes that you want them to be accessing your services in response.
Great, thank you. So we have a couple more minutes. Are there any other questions from folks on the webinar? Okay. Well, we're going to wrap up at this point. If you think of questions afterwards that you would like to pose to Cody, please feel free to email us. This is Erin, and my email address and Angela's email address were in the original webinar invite, so please feel free to email us with any follow-up questions. And thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. And thank you to Cody again.
Having me.